us just taking your feedback and input so we can weigh it in as we think through the process. We do not have a timeline to decide this. I suspect we still have several meetings to go before we can figure out what we're going to do. And so again, no decisions tonight, still a lot of work to be done here. Your input is important. With respect to the input, and this is the last thing I'll say, there are a number of people in the room. I suspect a lot of people will want to come up to the microphone and talk to us. I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to set a time limit, but I am going to ask you to be concise, clear, stay on the point. So I don't want to hear a lot of discussion that's not related to the bird dam itself. And I would ask you to not repeat what other people may have already said, because we would have already gotten that input. So those are going to be the ground rules as we go through this evening. And with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to our partners from the state so they can take you through an updated presentation, and we'll go from there. Okay? Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll start by introducing ourselves. I'm Jennifer Doyle-Breen from AECOM. So we are an engineering consulting firm, and we are providing design and permitting services to the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation Office of Dam Safety on the Abandoned Dams Program, which you'll hear about more in a minute, and I'll let my other colleagues introduce themselves.
Jean-Pierre Minois, also working for AECOM. I am an hydraulic engineer working on this project.
Hi, I'm Bill Saloma, the Director of DCR's Office of Dam Safety.
And I'm Robert Lowell, the Deputy Chief for Design and Engineering at DCR, and overseeing the Abandoned Dams Program.
Okay, so with that, I do have some slides I'm going to go through. I think it's around a half an hour, might be a little bit more. As Jim mentioned, if you came to the meeting in September, a lot of this is going to be repeated. We did go back and listen to the recording and noted that some of the questions that were received back in September. So I'll try to point out when we have some information that we want to highlight that answers some of those questions that were previously brought up. And I guess can everybody hear me okay? Is this working? Yes, okay. Okay, good. So this is just an overview of what I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna give a little bit of background on the project, talk about the Abandoned Dams Program and our general approach to evaluating these dams, talk about the work that we've done to date, including some alternatives analysis and conclusions that we'll share with you tonight. We also have some renderings for what we refer to as a spillway removal alternative, so I'll walk through them. And then we have some cost information I'll share, some information about property ownership, and then just very quickly a list of the permits that would be needed for any alternative that moves forward, and then summarize the conclusions and next steps, and then we can we'll take comments after that, as Jim said. So the Abandoned Dams Program, as I mentioned, AECOM is supporting Mass DCR Office of Dam Safety on this program. This is a pilot program. There are more than 6 abandoned dams in the state, but these 6 were chosen as part of the initial pilot program. All of these dams were chosen because they are significant or high hazard dams, and they are not in good shape right now. So they all pose hazards to the public safety, and right now, nobody is looking after these dams because the owners, for one reason or another, cannot be identified or have been able to just walk away from the dams. So Office of Dam Safety is stepping in to determine the best path forward to increase the safety of these dams. So obviously we're here to talk about Bird Pond in Walpole tonight. On this list, there are 2 dams that I would say are more advanced than Bird Pond. Lowes Pond in Oxford, and Bel Air Dam in Pittsfield. In Oxford, the town elected that dam should stay in place and be repaired. That project is actually going to go to construction over the winter or early spring. And the Bel Air Dam in Pittsfield, that municipality elected to remove that dam, and that project is actually out for construction bid right now. And as you'll hear more, for those 2 projects, and for Walpole, for Bird Pond here in Walpole as well, DCR has funded the design and permitting and construction of those projects, and they would do the same here in Walpole. So for all of these dams, including Bird Pond, the evaluation approach that has been used and is summarized here, this in Walpole has been going on since 2019. We did have some initial municipal outreach back in 2019 when we started this work. Again, for all the dams, the first step was to do a condition assessment, what we call a phase 2 condition assessment, which looks at the condition of the dam, looks at a number of factors in terms of its stability and whether it can safely pass flood conditions that it should be able to pass without failing and providing, posing a safety hazard. Then for each dam, again, including Bird Pond, generally speaking, we look at 3 options: either repairing the dam, removing the dam, or somehow partially removing it or breaching it so it's no longer considered a dam and no longer subject to the dam safety regulations. So these 3 alternatives are aimed to bring these dams into compliance with the dam safety regulations, either by repairing them, again, removing it, or doing something else to breach it and make it no longer be a dam. And DCR's approach is to engage the municipality to determine how they want to move forward. So again, DCR is not here to tell Walpole or anyone, what to do. They are just trying to make the dam safer. And so that's what this is one step in that process tonight. Generally speaking, for these dams, if a municipality chooses the repair alternative and prefers to keep the dam in place, then DCR requires that the municipality agree to take ownership of the dam so that there's an entity that has long-term responsibility for maintaining the dam, so we don't wind up in the future in the same situation we're in now. Generally speaking, if there is not municipal interest in keeping the dam in place, then full or partial removal of the dam is DCR's preference. This slide summarizes some of the existing information about Bird Pond Dam. It is a combined earthen embankment, stone masonry, and concrete structure. It has a height of just under 19 feet, and it's 430 feet long. It has an impoundment capacity of just under 300 acre-feet. It is an intermediate size. As Jim mentioned, it's a high hazard classification dam. And our phase 2 investigation showed that it is in an unsafe condition. So it is not meeting the dam safety regulations. It is in danger of there being something, unpleasant that could happen that we all want to avoid, which is why we're here tonight. In the meantime, while DCR has been working out how to address the problems with the dam that render it unsafe, they have been looking after it. Over the past few years, there have been issues with seepage and trespassers, and DCR did put up some fencing around the dam to keep trespassers out and try to keep it safe in the interim while an ultimate solution is determined. And there are, as I'm sure many of you here know, some buildings and businesses immediately downstream of the dam, and they are currently impacted, because they're just downstream of a dam that is not safe. But their presence of those buildings also limits what can be done at this site, which I'll get into more in a minute. And the summary is sort of highlighted there, though, below in yellow. The spillway channel does go below the buildings, which just limits our options of what can be done here to repair or remove the dam. When we were here in September, we had a lot of questions. It was clear we hadn't done a very good job of explaining what a spillway is. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time tonight going over that. The photos on the left show the dam, and I have some more coming up. I do just want to point out something so people can hopefully understand better what a spillway is. So a spillway is basically the part of the dam, and anybody over here feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that allows a controlled release of water through the dam. So at Bird Pond, we have the earthen embankment part of the dam, and then this is the spillway. So this is what I'm referring to when you hear me talk about spillway. It's basically like a waterfall. So it's where water flows through the dam. It has this pier in the middle, and it has walls on either side. Here's one of the walls. And this is a walkway that well, it still does exist, but it's been fenced off, I believe, right? This is what's no longer accessible because it was a safety hazard. Okay. So So this is a summary of work we've done to date. Like I mentioned, between 2019 and 2020, we did a bunch of evaluations at the dam site. We collected geotechnical information, sediment information, structural inspections, and we compiled all of that into a phase 2 report. And that report did recommend repairing the dam because of the concerns of the businesses that are downslope. I already mentioned some of the seepage concerns and the public safety concerns. So then in 2021, we did more detailed evaluation of what would need to be done to repair the dam. We looked at a few options. We determined that the spillway, if the dam were to stay in place as it is now, the spillway would have to be repaired. There would have to be armoring at the top of the dam because the dam, during a very large storm event, based on what we had evaluated, there would be water going over the top of the dam, so the dam would have to be stable. And then we did some additional sediment characterization in 2022. And then in 2023, we started down a pathway of doing some more detailed hydraulic and hydrologic investigation of what's going on at the dam, because we knew that it is the businesses that are downstream really present a challenge with how we're going to rehabilitate this dam. So we looked at a whole bunch of different options that I'll talk about a little bit. We looked at, we did look at potentially basically removing the dam. We looked at lowering that spillway. So right now, that spillway that I showed you on that last slide, that waterfall, that really maintains the water level in Bird Pond. That's really what makes Bird Pond a pond and not a river. So we looked at perhaps lowering that at various increments, and then we also looked at totally removing that spillway. So again, this slide pretty much says the same thing. These are all the alternatives we looked at, and then for each of these alternatives, we use the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation identification of hazards methodology to look at risk for flooding and danger to people downstream of the dam under a whole bunch of different scenarios, and I'm not going to show you all of them, but I am going to show you a few. So this methodology looks at not just flooding depth, but also velocity, because if there's a difference between still water and fast flowing water in terms of risk. Like I said, it looks at the risk to pedestrians, and it basically characterizes this risk into either low risk, a high danger consideration, or something in between, which is called a judgment zone. So I'm going to show you in a minute a table that summarizes the results from a few of those scenarios. But again, before I do, I just wanted to go again through some pictures to try to give people an understanding of what some of the features are. This is just another picture of the spillway. Again, it's just basically like a waterfall. You can see up here, this is the pond level over here. So the water from Bird Pond just flows over here, flows down the spillway. And there is that pier in the middle, so the spillway is sort of split into two portions. There's just another picture. And this handrail right here, I just wanted to point out, because I'm going to show you a view from the other side. So that handrail is basically along a walkway that goes adjacent to the building, the first building that's just downstream of the dam. This is just another photograph of the spillway, so it gives you an idea. Again, there's combined masonry and concrete walls that confine the flow through the spillway. And this is just another shot of that. This photo is not very good, but I wanted to show it, and I have a subsequent one that is better, just to give you an idea of the features out there. Again, when we were giving this presentation in September, we talked about the culvert that goes underneath the buildings that are downstream of the dam, and I think we didn't do a very good job of explaining how the spillway and the culvert work together. So the reason this is not a very good photo is because it is actually from a video that we took, or someone, I'm not really sure who took it, but a video that was taken. It's basically standing below in the spillway between two dam embankments, so with that pedestrian walkway sort of above the head of the person taking this video. And This is the top of the spillway, so again, the water is coming down from the pond, flows over the spillway, and right here, you'll see a better picture on the next slide. This is that handrail that I mentioned before. So basically, the water flows over the spillway, it immediately goes into this opening, which is the culvert that we keep referring to, that channels water underneath those buildings. And this next picture gives you a little bit better view. It doesn't have quite the perspective, but it shows you exactly where the water basically leaves the spillway and goes into the culvert. So that, hopefully that explains it better than we did in September. Okay, so this photograph shows the layout of what is there at the site. And again, just to point out a couple of things. This is opening the spillway, so those photos that I was just showing of the waterfall, this is where that is. So again, we've got the embankment on either side, and the spillway is basically like an opening in the dam that has is concrete. It's lined with concrete. And then that culvert opening is right here. So basically, the water right now goes over the spillway, it immediately enters that opening underneath these buildings, and then it continues downstream. Here's the Washington Street Bridge. These are the two buildings downstream of the dam. These two locations, I'm going to show you the next slide, is a table summarizing the results of flood risk, basically, of those two locations. So location 1 is right on top of the dam. Location 2 is the parking lot between those two buildings. So this table, again, we looked at numerous scenarios, but this table sort of summarizes the bookends, so to speak. The top line is existing conditions, so that's basically what the dam is like now. And as I mentioned, I hope I made clear, the dam needs to be repaired. The dam cannot be left the way it is because it's a safety hazard. So that top line, existing conditions, also represents what would be the case if the dam were basically repaired in place like it is right now. The second line where it says dam breach, that is essentially removing the dam, lowering the dam. Right now it's at elevation 102, so this would be lowering the dam to elevation 90 over most of the width of the dam with some side slopes. That's this row. And then the bottom row is removing the spillway. And I have some other graphics here too that I think will help illustrate that coming up. But essentially it is taking out that concrete structure that right now maintains the water level of the pond. So what this table is showing us is that, first of all, removing the dam is really not an option because you can see, let me start off with existing conditions. The top row there, and the left-hand side of the table, up here, this is location 1 that I showed you on the last slide. Over here is location 2. So this is the flooding conditions basically right on top of the dam. This is the flooding conditions in the parking lot between the two buildings. So under existing conditions, the dam does not overtop during the 10-year flood, the 50-year flood, or the 100-year flood. It does overtop during the 500-year flood. And that risk has been determined to be in that judgment zone. So it's not low risk, it's not high risk, it's sort of in an in-between area. And again, this is based on not only the flood depth, but the velocity of that water, and it's based on that Bureau of Reclamation methodology that I mentioned. Under existing conditions, there is flooding in the parking lot downstream, and over here we have red. Under the 500-year flood, the parking lot is, not only is there 4 feet of water, but it's flowing at a good, fast enough velocity that it's considered a high danger zone. If we were to remove the dam, you can see, just in a nutshell, where there used to be zeros, there is now flooded depth, and there are colors here, meaning the risk has gone up. So this option of removing the dam is really not a viable option because of the businesses that are present downstream and the buildings. The third lowest line here is removing the spillway. So there are some advantages to removing the spillway based on this table. Under the 500-year flood, there would not be overtopping of the dam. There's no flooding on top of the dam, so that's reduced the flood risk. And over here, in the parking lot, even though there's still flooding, for the 10-year, the 50-year, and the 100-year, it's the same. Yeah, but for the 500-year, the flood depth has gone down a little bit, 0.2 of a foot, so, not dramatically, but it has gone from red to yellow. So, and that is because, and I'll show you this in a minute in the slide I have, because there's not water going over the top of the dam, that water that's in the parking lot there is not flowing fast, and it is instead water that's basically backing up from the Washington Street Bridge. So here are some graphics we prepared after September, again, to try to illustrate this for people so it's a little bit clearer how this works. So I have 4 slides. This is base flow, then I'll show a 2-year and a 100-year. On each slide, the existing condition is on the top with the spillway in place, and on the bottom is what the schematic would look like if the spillway were removed. So just to orient you as to a couple of things, this red outline is the earth embankment part of the dam. So think of this as just like a slice through the site, and it's going directly through where the spillway is. But this outline is what would be on either side of the spillway, the dam embankment. These are the existing buildings, parking lot. This is that culvert that goes underneath the building. So like I showed you in the photos, water right now flows over down the spillway and goes immediately into the culverts. Washington Street Bridge is down here. This dotted line represents the spillway wall. This is that handrail that I pointed out in the photographs. So under existing conditions right now, this gray concrete representation is a representation of the spillway. So right now, here's the pond level, elevation 96. Water is flowing over all the time, over the spillway, through the culvert. Under base flows, there's no flooding, everything's okay. If the spillway were to be removed, so here's our spillway, it's no longer here. So the water level in the pond is no longer up here, it has decreased to elevation 87. And I have some renderings we'll show in a minute too. So the biggest difference, and it is a big difference, there's not a pond, there's just a river. Okay, and then here's the situation under the 2-year flood, essentially the same thing. The water level is a little bit higher, but there's still no flooding. Okay, now the 100-year storm. Under existing conditions, the 100-year flood elevation in the pond goes up to 102. When there's a 100-year storm, water is still flowing over the spillway, it gets into the culvert and goes downstream. However, you can see here the water level is higher here than it is here, and that's because there is flooding that is being backed up from the Washington Street Bridge. If the spillway were to be removed, during a 100-year event, the water elevation would still go up in the pond, the area that you now think of as the pond, but it wouldn't go up as high as it does right now. And then the last, I've got one more. Here's the 500-year flood scenario. So this is the one, if you think back to that chart, I mentioned that with the spillway being removed, there was some improvement of flood risk for the 500-year storm. So here's the existing condition. Right now, during a 500-year storm, water goes up over the top of the dam. It is, there's flooding here in the road on the upstream side of the buildings, and that is partially, it is because there's water coming over the top of the dam. But there's also water backing up here at the Washington Street Bridge. If the spillway were to be removed, that 500-year storm now is not going up over the top of the dam. It's down at elevation 97.3. There is still some flooding here, but it's more related. It is because of the backup of the water from the Washington Street Bridge. So even though there's water here, it has gone down a little bit, like I mentioned, 0.2 of a foot, but it's not flowing as fast anymore because there's not water coming over the top, it's just backing up, so it's still. Okay, we also prepared a few figures about showing the area that would be inundated under existing conditions and future conditions. During the 100-year and 500-year storm, we had some questions in September about what the effects would be downstream, and so these are really meant to illustrate the effects downstream. There are 3 different water levels shown here. The solid blue line is the normal water elevation. This lighter blue area is the 100-year inundated area, and this sort of teal color is the 500-year inundated area. So this is under existing conditions. The important thing I want to point out here is these numbers right here. These numbers, the next slide I'm going to show you is the scenario with the spillway removed, and these numbers don't change. The numbers upstream of the dam will change, but downstream they won't. 86, 91.4, and 89.5, they're the same. So under the scenario with the spillway removed, nothing downstream is going to change during any storm events. It's going to be exactly the same as it is now. Upstream, it will change. The normal water level will be lower. The 100-year floodplain elevation will be lower, and the 500-year flood will be lower. So these are some of the conclusions that we drew after going through this very extensive analysis. Again, the culvert does convey flow underneath those occupied buildings, and that is a challenge of how to deal with that. The area does have a very large watershed, 25.4 square miles. There's a lot of water coming down here, which is also a challenge. The development immediately downstream. Again, the Washington Street Bridge is serving to back up water during storm events. And so our major conclusion was that the spillway removal does appear to offer some more flood risk benefits compared to all the other alternatives that we looked at. So the next few slides are going to show some information about the spillway removal concept. And again, this is just to help explain and understand what this concept would look like. Again, we're here tonight to solicit input, and no decisions have been made or will be made tonight. But if the spillway were removed, again, there wouldn't be a pond, there would just be a stream. So the green shows area that would, instead of being water, would be vegetated. And the blue shows the thread of the future river under this scenario. We also, this is the same slide we showed in September. We did have a lot of questions some questions about the future regulatory areas under the Wetlands Protection Act if the spillway were to be removed, and that's what this slide shows. Under this scenario, the blue, again, is the future river channel, and this river channel its location has been selected to mimic where it would have been historically before the dam was built, and which is, the way we would feel it should, if this were implemented, that's where the river channel should go, because that's where Mother Nature intended it to be, and it's very hard to win a battle against Mother Nature that way. The yellow shows the future FEMA floodplain, which would be bordering land subject to flooding limit as well, and then the green shows the future 200-foot riverfront area under this scenario. Now we have some existing and future views of the pond and the dam. Most of these are what we presented back in September, but I'll just run through them again. These red boxes show the various views we're going to look at in the next few slides. So here's an existing view from standing on the dam / dilapidated pedestrian bridge and looking upstream. This is what it looks like now. This is an artist rendering of what it would look like if the spillway were to be removed. Again, in September, we had a lot of questions about what is a dry dam, because that's really what we would refer to the spillway removal alternative as. It would really be operating a dry dam. This really shows you what the dry dam is. there's not water there except for the river. Most of the area upstream of the dam is dry. So that's really what we mean when we say dry dam. There is a river, but there's not water outside of the river during non-storm events. Here's another view. This is on the south side of the pond, standing near the condominiums, looking to the north. This is the view right now. And this is what the artist's rendering of what the view would be like in the future under the spillway removal alternative. I do want to point out in this photo or rendering, you can see that the dam in the background, there are not trees near it. Part of what the dam, any dam repair alternative would include would be removing trees, because the Office of Dam Safety Regulations don't allow trees to be present or woody plants to be present within 20 feet of the toe of the slope or on the embankment, because those roots can cause some instability. You don't want woody plants and deep roots growing near your dam. So that would be true whether the dam were just repaired as it is now, or if it were repaired with the spillway removed. This is on looking southeast from the northern side of the pond under current conditions. And again, here's the view in the future. You can see there are no big trees right up on or near the dam. Another view, this is looking from, again, from the condominiums on the south side looking to the north. And this is the view in the future. Again, you can see there are no trees. And again, with or without the spillway removal, the dam repair would remove the trees in order to maintain the integrity of the dam and render it in a safer condition. We had a couple questions about some of the other views. This is another view that we went out and took recently. So you can see there's no leaves on the trees. This is again over on the south side of the pond, adjacent to the condominium, sort of, but not that far from the dam. It's probably, maybe 100 feet, maybe 150 feet upstream of the dam. So this is the view now, and this is what the view from that location would look like in the future. So without those trees on the dam, it does seem like there would be more of an open view to the buildings behind. And again, that would be true whether the spillway is removed or not, just to repair the dam and get the woody vegetation away from the dam toe. Going further upstream to the west, this is the view that we saw when we walked along the path. Once you get a little bit further away from the dam upstream, it seems like there's less view of the dam. Again, we were only at ground level. Obviously, we can't get onto people's private balconies to see what the views might be like from further up. But this is what we saw, and this is under current conditions. We don't have a future rendering because those trees would still be there. They're not leaving, so they would still screen the view from this location. Okay, so moving on to some cost numbers. These are outdated costs at this point, because as I mentioned, we've been working on this since 2019. So these are a little bit outdated, but we did come up with some costs back in 2023, comparing repairing the dam just like it is right now. Again, removing the woody vegetation, doing some armoring on top of the dam, doing some other structural things that are needed, but not removing the spillway. That is the cost that is on the column that says dam repair. So down at the bottom, you can see it's just under $4 million. And then we also looked at comparable costs for doing the dam repair with the spillway removal, and those are more to remove the spillway. It's just under $4.5 million. Again, keeping in mind these are not updated, but they're an apples to apples comparison. So, from DCR's perspective, just repairing the dam would be a cheaper option. And like I mentioned, and we'll summarize again at the end, DCR's approach to this is that they would, for whatever the municipality wants to move forward with, DCR would pay for the design, the permitting, and the construction, and prepare, the final product would be a safe dam that is in good shape for years to come. So just looking at the cost numbers, dam repair is cheaper, but in DCR's mind, it is hard to entirely ignore the flood risk benefit of removing the spillway. Ownership, it was mentioned at the beginning, we don't know who owns the dam. That's why it's part of the Abandoned Dams program, and DCR, Office of Dam Safety, is moving ahead with trying to make it safe. The embankment, part of the embankment and the retaining walls are on parcel 2B, owned by the Hogan Family Trust, and then the impoundment is owned currently, based on the tax assessor's records, by the LA Trust with a trustee of Michael Imperity, and we're aware of the purchase agreement currently under development by Wall Street Development Corp. No matter what the town decides to do, there would be a lot of permitting that needs to be done to even repair the dam, with or without the spillway removal. So those are listed here. I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is just to give you a sense that there's, as Jim mentioned, we have a long road ahead of us still. We have a lot of permitting to do. We have not designed this. What I've been presenting is really just conceptual. So we are, once a decision is made by the town about how they like to proceed, once they make that decision in concert with DCR Office of Dam Safety, we are a few years out of actually having this project constructed, whatever it ends up being. So these are our conclusions. Again, the whole reason that we're here, as Jim mentioned, we came in front of the select board a year ago. We presented in September, and we're back here tonight. DCR's Office of Dam Safety's goals is to get input from the town on these alternatives. The DCR Office of Dam Safety is not here to say, do this or do that. They want to work in collaboration with the town and get their input. The dam as it exists now reduces the risk of flood impacts to downstream businesses and infrastructure, so simply removing it is really not an option. Operating a dry dam without the spillway in place reduces risk and offers incremental flood protection for that 500-year storm. And again, no matter what alternative is selected to move forward, DCR would fund and implement the repair design, permitting, and construction. And at the end of the day, there would be a dam left in place that is stable, in good shape, but there would be ongoing inspections needed and some relatively low-level, long-term maintenance, such as mowing, and making sure there's not vegetation growing up on the dam that's not wanted. So next steps are to reach a consensus on the selected path forward. After that, there would be some additional data that needs to be collected to inform the design. There would be permitting, like I mentioned, during the whole process. There would be continued outreach with the town and the public. And eventually we would arrive at a final design. It would go out for bidding and selection of a construction contractor. And that's the end of the presentation.
Jennifer, thank you for taking us through that, and hopefully we all found that helpful and interesting. I know there were probably a lot of questions. There was a lot of information there, so we'll get there in a minute. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to go to the board first for comments or questions, so let me do that first. So anyone from the board who would like to comment or ask a question? Mark.
I'm just thinking about, beyond the Bird Pond Dam, you then move down to I don't remember the name of it, but the Hollingsworth and Vose Dam. Does doing this put added pressure on that dam? Or were they going to need to do something there? Or is this just going to be, in the 500-year flood, there'll be flooding in the parking lot? And, I did dig up an old study. Back in 2011, there was flooding in the parking lot. I don't remember whether it was a hurricane or a series of storms, but I'm just wondering if there's a ripple effect going downstream.
There's not a lot of attenuation in Bird Pond, so whatever water is coming into the system is going downstream, and we don't believe the approach that we've taken puts more pressure downstream or additional velocity or volume. It'd relatively be in the same scheme of things through the entire regime, from low flows to high flows.
If you think back to the figure that I showed where I compared the downstream water elevations under existing conditions and future conditions, those downstream numbers were all the same.
Okay.
So we don't feel like there would be any change.
Thank you.
What else? Glenn?
I'd like to just ask you real quick about the anticipated future wetland resource areas that you have on this slide. And really what I'm interested in is what's going to happen to the river after whatever we do with the dam spillway removal or with the dam repair, whatever our decision is, how is that going to impact the river upstream? And really, we have a river that turns into a pond, and my question is, can you help me understand when does that river sort of begin to narrow? Right now it widens out into a big wide pond, and when does it begin to narrow into a narrow river that's going to end up at the dam? Like what's it going to look like when we're done here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to look like that rendering that I showed that I can flip back to.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. So I guess my question is, when does that start? How far
Yep.
upstream?
So I had another figure here. This figure here shows essentially we didn't continue going upstream, but at least to the point shown on this figure, it would be a riverine environment and not a ponded environment. I believe if you continue going up a little bit, there's another dam as well.
There
So
is. So I'm looking at, on that slide, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt you. I'm looking at the Riverwalk condominiums, those 2 rows of apartments, condos down there. So really, your sketch here it starts there. It's just west of that point. So is that really where you expect to see changes in the river flow at that point?
So
What?
so here, the changes in the river would start right here at the dam
Sure.
and go at least up here.
And
So,
beyond? Or I guess that's my question.
I can't say whether they would go beyond, but are these the condominiums?
Those are the
Yeah,
condominiums.
so in this area.
Just the bottom is,
The bottom is, and then
that's Pinnacle up
the
above it.
pinnacle's up top there, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, certainly in this area, it would be a river and not a pond.
Okay, and the river seems like it's tending toward the Pinnacle
South.
neighborhood,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
south.
yeah.
Um,
We laid this out. This is the natural low point, the Bellway. We can still see it through the mission data that we've collected, which is something we collected as part of the phase 2 report.
Yeah.
So this is historically where the river channel was. And again, our opinion is this is the best place to return the river channel to, because that's where the water will want to flow.
Anyone else? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to bring us to what we're really here for, which is to get feedback and input from the folks in the room here. So what I'd ask you to do is I'm going to ask you one at a time, just give your name, your address, and then briefly your point. And please stay focused on the Bird Dam area itself, what we've been talking about, so that we can keep the conversation going. Subsequent speakers, please pay attention to what's being said ahead of you so we don't get into a whole lot of repetition if we can avoid that. So who would like to go first? Please, step right up.
So I'm Bob Hardcastle. I live at 36 Rose Court Way in the condominiums. This might just help. So I live right. And the point that I want to make is I want to make sure that the town is aware of how much the pond is used for recreational purposes. From my vantage point, I get to see everything that goes on in that lower part of the pond. And in the spring and in the summer and in the fall, certainly in the summer, virtually every night, there are people who fish off the landing. There's the dam part, but then there's this landing part, and then there's another landing part. And there are people who use it every night to fish. I'm not a fisherman, so it doesn't matter to me about fishing, but people do use it for recreation. And they use it there, and then in the very corner, there's a low, shallow place, and they like to fish there also. So there's one group of people who use the pond. Another group of people who use the pond are people who come down with their kayaks and their canoes, and it's not a deep pond, so there's these little boats that have these little motors that the fishermen can not go too deep on. And while they don't use it as much as the group I just mentioned, there are people out there all the time using it for recreational purposes. And the third group of people who use it for recreational purposes, and I don't quite know how the word gets around, but it does, the tip of that pond is facing west. And so when there is a sunset, somehow the word gets out, hey, there's a sunset. And people, and they're not neighbors of they aren't people who live in the neighborhood. The people come in, they bring their little chairs and they sit on the landing and they watch the sunset up at the end, and it happens all the time. At first, when I moved, by the way, I've lived there for 17 years. At first, I was concerned about, is this going to be a pain in the butt? And it hasn't been at all. And it just amazes me that people find out about it. So I just wanted to make the point, it's not like it's out somewhere and no one ever uses this pond. It's an actively used pond. And that's not to mention the people there's paths around the whole pond and the Pinnacle and the other one, and people actively use it for that too. So, there you go.
Thank you, I appreciate that input. Who'd like to go next? Sure, go right ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I am one of those people. I live on Washington Street, just upstream. I have photos I could share, actually, of sunsets.
Just give us your name and address.
I'm sorry,
please.
Alex Green, at 365 Washington Street. I was elsewhere, I think, when you laid the ground rules
That's
for
okay.
the comment period. My apologies. Yeah, I saw that amongst the permitting structures we would need would be the Department of Wildlife or waterfowl. I think there was something to that regard. But yeah, I have noticed that if the spillway were to be removed, I think that all of the and there are lots of waterfowl that I've seen there over the years. The swans, geese, ducks. I think I've even seen mammals. Martins, I believe, or not beavers, I would imagine, because I haven't seen any proof of the beavers. But it's been a very lovely, serene kind of area, and of course there's some trails on either side or like a walkway next to the condominiums, and then on the other side, in fact, there's a trail that goes from the upper dam. The one near the, I forget the road, upstream, the Neponset. Plimpton Street? Plimpton, yeah, thank you. So yeah, the Plimpton, I don't know what that dam is called, but there are trails that go from Plimpton down to Washington and then back up on both sides. They're not very well maintained, but they are trails that I've frequented. And I find that it would impact, the beauty of the area for me if that spillway were to be removed.
Thank you. And I believe what you were referring to was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Endangered Species Consultation Permitting. That's what you were referring to. Thank you. Thank you. All right, who'd like to go next?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Kenneth Southwood. I live a little bit further upstream, South Walpole, 4 Neponset. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you, DCR, for taking on this project. It's important. Thank you for how you laid it out. Let's cover the facts and stick with what we have here. I'd just like to say that we live on a hill. In a matter of long-term public safety, you laid out the designs and everything, and when we look closely at the numbers, whether we restore it as it is and we retain the water, or we spill it, the 500-year number is still dangerous. How it's not dangerous to Hollingsworth and Vose is still befuddling. I'm kind of figuring that out, but it's still dangerous. And the fact remains, we live on a hill. When Walpole loses its water, there's a long-term public safety effect here that we also need to think about. With respect, there's nobody in this room that's going to be around in 100 years or 500 years. And I don't think many people are going to walk in this room that are going to be around in 100 years or 500 years. Now, there's been plenty of speculation throughout the years of what are we going to do with our waters. Well, Walpole's in that unique situation where we're on the hill, and when it hits Norwood, it primarily goes flat. Our dams were built for the purpose of energy and water conservation as well as water supply. Our number one pumping station, our primary pumping station in Walpole, is sitting on the Neponset River. So if somebody says to me, the level of the river doesn't affect our public drinking supply, well, in a lot of places it does. Let's hope that we don't face, because if we don't have a 500-year flood and we have a 500-year drought, let's hope we never have to go to the river with buckets and boil our water. But at the same time, if we restore the dam as it is, we work with the neighbors just below the Hogan Family Trust and others, the spillway that runs underneath their property, we work with them. So it's $4 million and a little less to restore it as it is. Well, if the private landowner, if we knew who that was, wanted to do that, even 10 years ago, he was facing immediately $2 million in litigation to fix it. Never mind $4 million. He was looking at $6 to $8 to $10 million just to even approach it realistically. Well, if we're coming in with a $4 million number, as stated last week at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, with respect to town finance, town planning, Walpole is flush with cash, and I would ask that Walpole find a way to take a little bit of that cash to possibly supplement the DCR, that's taxpayers' cash that we're flush with, to supplement this DCR project to restore that dam and to also reflect back the recreation that comes with it. I've been busy around town, as many people know, that this is my thing, the water. Well, it's a proven commodity. It's not the golden egg that's gonna solve an economic crisis, but it's a long-term economic prosperity that comes to families, fishing, wildlife, and just everything that goes with water. Water is life. We live on a hill. When we let it go, it's gone. I'd be remiss to my brothers and sisters in service if I didn't stand up here and fight to save this water retention, this historically proven piece of infrastructure that possibly has energy opportunities down the road, but if it doesn't work, we still have our water, and we still have the opportunity to develop on that water. Because without it, it's all gone. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody's effort in this, and it's a very serious concern. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Who'd like to go next? Sure, come on up.
I'm Barry Whaler at 18 Rose Court Way at Riverwalk. I just want to point out that Riverwalk has maintained a public access for the past 20 years at their expense as part of the conditions of our condominium. It's not heavily trafficked. It was to a greater extent during and since the pandemic. Mainly people not from the complex for sure. It also, I think, just to expand on the recreational aspects, it connects across the dam with the Endine Trail that's been mentioned, which has been upgraded in recent years. And if you continue on that trail, which I have during the winter, snowshoeing, goes all the way to the Dog Rock. And I think preserving green space, recreational space, makes a lot of sense for the town of Walpole as it gets more and more crowded, and I think it's just very valuable. The other question I have relates to what it's going to look like if you take away the pond. So the artist rendition looks nice, but Depending on how exactly the river flows, it's really hard to know what it's going to look like. And certainly from the side where people walk and on the other side, you're not going to see the river if there's any vegetation. You know, these pictures are aimed upriver. So I'm concerned about that. And the last point is, and maybe this was mentioned and I missed it, what is the regulatory aspects of the land around the river when it's very narrow, considering my understanding is that the land itself is private land and not public land, and therefore, what power does the town have to make sure that that area, it was mentioned, I think, in the last presentation, that there might be trails in that area, and, you know, who pays for that? And that may be private land, from what I understand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that input. Who'd like to go next? Sure. Thank you.
Kathy Callahan. I live at 32 Rose Court Way. I just had a question that wasn't clear to me. Perhaps it is to anybody else. Thank you for your presentation. It was very, very well researched. The one question I have is, it just seems that everybody in this room wants it to stay as is. And you've done your homework to show us the different variations. The one, of course, we want is for the dam to be repaired and life will go on as it is for everybody here. So I guess just the question I have that I only heard one reference to is what the burden would be to the town to maintain this. And the only thing that I did hear was that the town would have to take care of the vegetation, the trees would be gone, and that would be the town's responsibility to maintain it. So could you just reiterate or explain what the burden to the town would be? Because clearly financial is great. We've got this covered thanks to the state and the GCR and these gentlemen here who've done their research. But just for my edification, maybe anybody else's, just define what the burden would be to maintain this. Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
So I'll take a shot at it, and then I'll ask Jim Johnson and other members of the board. I know we have our town engineer here, and I know Landis is here, so anybody else who would want to jump in and just talk about this, we have sewer and water people here. You know, I'll open it up to anybody to help answer the question. So first of all, let's talk about the ownership of the dam, because I think that is a central aspect of this. And let me even back up and say, if I could wave a magic wand here and not increase the liability to the town or create a future cost to the town that will be large, I would do it in a second, because I agree with the people who have said we should keep that pond area as it is. And I said in my opening comments, I am very sympathetic to the people who live there, who have those views that we've heard so nicely discussed and described here tonight. And so I am very sympathetic to that. Again, if I could wave a magic wand, I know what I'd do. Now we have to talk about the reality. So right now, this dam is owned privately. It's under the name of Lloyd Marded. We don't know who Lloyd Marded is. And so one of the things that would have to happen here in order for this for us to move forward with the repair, and frankly, it's also true with the spillway, is the town is going to have to take that property through eminent domain, because we can't operate on it without, you know, having the permission to do so. So the town will have to take ownership of the dam. You have heard the folks from DCR say, and they haven't said it in absolute terms, but having had a number of conversations with them and having pressed them on a couple of other dams that I know work has been done on, I think it's likely that the only conditions where the state would own the dam is with the spillway removed. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But you've been pretty clear that if it's a dam repair, so fix it as it is, keep the spillway in place, keep the pond in place, that the town, who would have already had to take the land through eminent domain would have to retain ownership of the dam. So what do we get? First of all, do you agree with that? Is that true? Okay, they're
Yes.
nodding north and south, so yes. So what comes with that ownership? Well, there's a bunch of things. Number one is the liability of the dam itself. You see, could you go back to the risk slide that shows the 500-year flood and the dam repair? What this slide is going to show is that there is a high degree of risk in the dam repair. And the dam repair is actually the existing conditions. They don't call it that, but when you repair the dam as it currently stands, everything will be the same. So it is today and tomorrow repaired. If you go to the far right, you can see the 500-year flood where you've got the overtopping of the 4 feet and creating a lot of fast-moving water down through that second parking lot area that they talked about in terms of, you know, if someone was standing there, or if there's cars there, or whatever, those things are likely to get washed away because of the depth and the speed of the water. So if the town owns the dam after repairing it, we take on that liability. So that is something we would have to think very hard about. It's one of the big factors that the board is going to have to consider. And what we need to be then asking ourselves is, that's the current day view. Whenever that flood were to occur, you never know when the 5-year flood's going to happen. It could happen tomorrow. Forecast suggests otherwise, but you get my point. What is going to happen is somewhere down the road, there is going to be one of those floods. The water's going to go up and overtop the dam. And even in the repair of the dam scenario, we still have that. So that's a risk that the town would be taking on. So that's one. Number two is the long-term cost of maintaining the dam. Break that into two pieces. You've got the day in, day out maintenance of the dam, which largely comes down to things like mowing to make sure that those trees that would grow up don't get into the earthen dam and start to erode it, keep the grasses down, all that kind of stuff. But over the longer term, even a repaired dam is going to deteriorate over time. And so the town is going to have to maintain that dam just like it would maintain any of our other infrastructure, our roads, our schools, our fire engines, all of our capital assets need to be maintained over time. The same thing would be true with the dam. And at some point, I don't know when that some point would be. How old is this dam, do we know?
Over 100, the current dam is over 100 years old.
So call it 100 years. None of us will be here then, but 100 years from now, people will be here. And that will be a huge cost that the town will then have to absorb to repair the dam once again in 100 years when it gets back to some deteriorated state. So those are the areas that I see. I'll recap. Liability of the 500-year flood, who knows what that could turn into since we would now own the dam. The ongoing maintenance day to day, the mowing and other things that we would have to do in order to operate that dam. The long-term costs that the town would have to absorb because we would own the dam going forward. Board, anybody else want to add to that? Mark?
Yeah, I would just add to that. My biggest worry is the liability of owning a dam. We own several dams. This would be another one. There's a long-term liability with that. And I understand it mostly affects, or it especially affects the people who live in Riverwalk and Pinnacle Way. So I would ask you to think of the question this way. What if we rebuilt the dam and gave it to you? Would you be willing to take on that risk forever? So I have mentioned that to a couple of people who live in Riverwalk or Pinnacle Way. So it's a big step. And, you know, I always hate to take on new liabilities for the town. I think that's one of the things I really try to do is make sure we're not doing things that will cost the town money now and in downstream. So that's one of the things that I'm thinking of. So I just wanted to jump in with that.
Thanks, Mark.
Anyone else want to add anything? Glenn?
I just want to make another comment about what happens upstream, because again, if the spillway removal is an option, it is an option on the table. if we go that way, I want to make sure that what happens upstream is the right thing. So, and I know to some extent we don't own the land, and I heard eminent domain mentioned, but whatever it takes for us to control what happens upstream to be the right thing for the neighbors, because we need plantings, we would need, we don't know exactly which way the river's gonna change flow, so we would have to just improve that area, because multiple people have talked about the recreation component. And so we need to make sure that what we do results in a change upstream, that we do the right thing with that.
Anyone else?
We've been talking about this for quite a bit, and I think one point to make is that, as a select board, this came to us. Again, just to reiterate, the owner of this dam is unknown. It is to come upon us to really research this, work with the DCR, and try to, in the community as well, because your input is really valuable to us. This is kind of in my neighborhood. My son went fishing there this summer. We have used the Undine trails. I appreciate absolutely the beauty of the pond there, but the liability and taking on a liability for the town and the financial, that's a whole different topic to continue the discussion. So it is really hard for us to weigh both of these options as we talk to the DCR and kind of get more into the different plans and options that are available.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just
Jim,
have a couple quick things
Sure.
to add. So the property was taken in tax title in 1996. Since then, no taxes have been paid on the property. There's only about $25,000 owed in back taxes on it, but we actually haven't taken ownership of it. It's a process that we'll have to go through, and if the board decides to go down this route, we'll have to take ownership of the property. We'll also have to work on an agreement with DCR to basically say, okay, this is what the board wants to do. Let's say we build the dam, here's what we want to build this dam to. Do we want to have spillways underneath it? We'll work with our town engineering department. They'll probably have to bring in some consultants who have some expertise in this. But there's a whole process, and I expect this process, if the board decides to take ownership of this, to take at least a few years, 3, 4, probably 5. So there's a process on our end. The board's mentioned liability. I look at liability in terms of what's the insurance cost for the town of Walpole. Minimal, our insurance, property and casualty budget's about $1.1 million a year. Also, what's the short-term maintenance? Jim mentioned mowing, small-term maintenance around there, but I'm also looking at 10, 20, 50 years down the road. Will the town be called upon to replace that dam or do about $1 to $5 million worth of work in 20 or 30 years? What's the cost of that? So these are all things that, as a town administrator, I look at with our department heads.
So let me just, 1 second, because I'm going to have some people, did we answer your question? Okay, I would be happy to keep digging in on that if you'd like, but that is, or at least some of the things that immediately come to mind and that we've become aware of as we have worked through this a little bit. Two of my friends from DCR, is there anything else you can think of that none of us have said thus far that would go to the answer of this question?
Right.
Periodic inspections, roughly every 5 years, which would cost somewhere around $7,000 annually.
Okay.
I mean, every 5 years.
Okay. So not a lot of money, but more spent.
Something.
Okay. All right, Bill.
Bill Abbott. I live on West Street. It's a long ways from the dam. But I do have a question. A couple of times you've mentioned the Washington Street bridge is causing some backup. Is there any thought of making some sort of alterations there? I think we had an article at town meeting a few meetings ago to do some work there, that doing something to eliminate the backup. It seemed that was causing some backup into the parking lots. It's something that the town knows.
Right, it is true that the bridge is causing backed up flooding, that's not, DCR doesn't have any control over that bridge or that roadway, so I think that would be something for the town to think about.
We could, go ahead, Bill.
I understand that if there is something, it would be on the town. You're only concerned about the dams, but I just want to make sure that it wasn't I'm just looking at the dam, that's it, as opposed to, by the way, we could do something, and it would have to be somebody else, in fact, the town, since we own that bridge, that would change your chart here, either making the velocity go down or the amount of water in the parking lot, something along those lines. And even then, if something could be done, would that mean that the dam that's holding back the pond for H&V, I understand that your main interest is the dam, but I'd be interested to know, have we looked, and, because maybe there's some alternative that, improves the situation.
It is a it may be a combination of both the bridge and the downstream dam. We did not really look at explaining it completely. We just calculated what it's based on the existing analysis done by FEMA. So yes, there might be something to be done, but it is there are several structures downstream that would affect the water level. So no, we have not looked at it.
Yeah, we have not looked at making at any modifications to the bridge.
I think it would be important for, there might be some money that the town would have to spend to see, is there something that might, I don't know, maybe we keep the pond because we've done something else, and I'd like the town to look into spending some money on that, because apparently you folks are, limited as to what you can.
Well, there's a reason we didn't look at that, because we're trying to stay within the confines of what exists today with respect to any potential impacts downstream. So if we look into modifying the bridge, there are going to be impacts downstream. You can catch yourself in a cycle that just continues. Like, we're operating with infrastructure that's existed for decades and decades, and JP mentioned FEMA. If we go beyond our project site, we can impact FEMA flood profiles downstream, and would have to have the river remapped and then mitigate potential issues that come up with other properties downstream. But right now, before and after is roughly the same.
Can the town take a look, and it may mean spending some money to come up with an alternative that may be better than just focusing on the dam. And maybe not. Maybe it turns out that the only thing and the best thing is to deal with the dam in one of the two alternatives.
If I could just add for a moment, I think from what Bill has laid out, the confines of Bird Pond really are limited by the Washington Street structure. If there's an interest in town to take a look at the entire, flow of the Neponset River through town and through each of the structures and how could it be optimized or made better, that's kind of beyond what we had tried to address with just focusing on Bird Pond Dam, but that's an interesting consideration. But we tried to limit our study by what the structures that limited the flows in and out of the dam, this dam itself, and what was limited by the existing infrastructure of the other roadways and other dams that we don't own.
Jim, did you have something?
So just a few things, Bill. So we did put some money towards a culvert on Washington Street, but it was at the other end near the DPW yard. The culvert we're still finishing up. But Carl just reminded me that there's two down on that end, the two Washington Street bridges. About 20 years ago, one was rebuilt over the railroad spur bridge. That was rebuilt. And then the Stone Arch Bridge near the Riverway. I recall us looking at that a few years ago when the previous town engineer was here, and it was millions to rebuild that archway, but I'd have to do some more digging on that second one. I think that's the one we're talking about.
Right.
So, yeah.
Jim, could I?
Sure, Ben.
Based on what Bill said as well, I mean, there's two, and from what I understand, and if I misspeak, please correct me, but there's two limiting factors. There's the culvert and then there's the bridge, right? So even if the town did want to spend money, the owner of the culvert would also have to make revisions to the volume or whatever it may be in order for the bridge to have an impact. So it goes a little bit to what the DCR folks are saying, is there's multiple structures downstream then that would have to change. So if the town changed the bridge, there's still the culvert in between that will only allow so much volume through. So it's not going to have that impact. It'd have to be an iterative process where everybody who owns something along that line would have to be willing to make a change.
Just nice to know.
I agree. Oh, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I agree.
I think we could look at it, Bill. And the way I would think about it is, we're going to have a flooding problem in that parking lot regardless. And keeping the dam, repairing the dam just makes it worse. And some of it is because things back up in that backwater area, as you're pointing out. So I think we could look into that and see what we could do to alleviate some of that. But Ben's point is right. We have the limiting factor of the size of the culvert running, and the reason that DCR keeps pointing out that the culvert runs under the buildings, because this is something we have pressed on, is, well, why don't you just increase the size of the culvert? You can't, because it's under the buildings, which makes it a hugely challenging engineering problem. And so the culvert is a limiting factor. The other question that we have asked is, well, is there a way for us to solve that problem by keeping the existing dam? Could you go back to the 500-year flood picture?
Oh.
Cut through?
This one?
Yeah. So that's existing, that would be with the dam repaired, right? You note the.
No, yes, correct, yeah.
That's the
The water
earthen
going
dam.
up over the top,
That's
yep.
the spillway. This is the earthen dam, right? You note the water going over the top of the earthen dam. That's a big challenge. That's what causes that big velocity and high volume of water in the parking lot. The question was, well, how about if you increase the height of the dam, right? So you keep the 500-year flood within the impound area. The problem is, can you go to the slide that shows the overhead of the site with the dam?
Oh, this one?
That'll probably work. So this is the earthen dam right here, correct? Okay. If you raise the height of the earthen dam, as I just described, the problem is when you get out here, the water will go around the dam at some point, and it will flood into this area here, and perhaps on the other side. So, and the other thing was, we talked about $4 million to repair the dam, but that doesn't get rid of that red box on the far right. It's really, and we don't have a number for this, but it is safe to say it is many millions of dollars more to increase the height of that dam and deal with then all the fall-around issues and so forth. So we've pressed on that issue pretty hard and said, you know, is there a way to get that red box to turn something other than red? And can it be done for some reasonable cost? And it's quite a bit more than the $4 million. That's safe to say, correct? Okay. You've already spoken, so let me see if there's anybody else who'd like to speak. Sure.
My name is Ethan Pollock. I live at 11 Rose Court Way in East Walpole in the Riverwalk development. No matter what path the board decides to go on this one, the town is going to have to take ownership, whether it's a repair or a replacement. So you're going to own the liability no matter which way you go. So the liability, I see, is not a legitimate issue or a legitimate concern. I say that as a taxpayer. So I'm willing to take the hit, one way or the other. But the liability is going to be there for the town.
So and I don't want to debate, but I want to inform here. The liability is there, which is the reason we don't want to own the dam, period, all right, because we take on liability no matter what. The liability of repairing the dam is considerably larger than taking the spillway out. And again, I don't want to get into a debate on that. It's two choices. There are two different risk profiles on those choices. Repair the dam does carry a lot more risk with it than taking the spillway out.
Right. But the town is still going to own it.
I want
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
In order to do work on it, you're going to have to own it.
I don't want
There's a negotiation that's going to happen here at some point, so.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but what he's referring to is the fact that the town has to take it by eminent domain no matter what to have the work done on that.
That's correct.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
That is correct.
And then after that, would the DCR take ownership of it in order to maintain it if we did a certain change? Or if we did the other change, then the town would have to retain ownership of it. So, correct. First step is town takes ownership. After that, it'd be a negotiation.
Your point is right about the liability. Owning a dam, regardless of how big it is, has liability associated with it. So you make a very good point. Thank you. Who'd else like to speak? Sure.
My name's Terry Hogan, Hogan Family Realty Trust. I own the two buildings in question here, and I'm not seeing a positive result for my property either way. You're gonna drop 0.2% or a foot if you remove the dam, and you're only gonna stay the same if you keep the overflow part of the spillway there. My concern is I haven't seen any engineering as to tying the river. If you take the dam out, tying the river directly into the culvert that goes under my buildings, I don't know where you're gonna tie it in, whether you're gonna tie it in before the structure where the dam begins, or just breach the whole dam and let a V come through there. If the culverts fill up and the water backs up from the bridge or Voss's Dam, now if the culvert starts where the spillway ends right now, that means if the culvert is full, the water's gonna go around the buildings, creating a much faster stream of water going through the parking lots and could erode the backside of the dam as well. So what plan do you have of tying the culvert into the stream? And is the water gonna back up behind that culvert into the dam? Is it gonna be like a slow release type of dam now, like on Washington Street?
What I would say is that the plan would be to have the existing wall on either side of the concrete spillway remain in place or repair or rebuild, and that would connect directly to the culvert.
Yeah, but that culvert, that wall, isn't gonna come up to my building. There's like 20 or 30 feet there that the water's gonna flow around that V.
No, but it does exist currently.
Yeah, currently it does.
Yes.
And,
That would remain.
but the spillway, to a certain extent, and the dam, backs the water up into the river, into the pond. And it comes over the spillway in the amount that the spillway will allow to come over right now. I've been there for 35 years. I've seen pretty much every scenario except the 100-year flood. Last year, we rained, every weekend for the summer into the fall, and we saw our parking lot go underwater for maybe 6 to 8 inches. So what I'm saying is, if there's nothing between the building and where the hill of the dam is and where you connect to the culvert that goes under my building, the water's gonna flow over the culvert and around those two buildings, creating another very positive flow of water. How are we gonna address that?
I do believe that it is the current situation. For what we show on the graph is when you have something above the 100-year flood, you have some spillage at that location between the dam and the culvert.
Go one more, please.
This situation, for example, you have some spillage that goes on either side of your building, the parking lot.
I've never seen that yet, and I grew up in East Walpole. I remember seeing the 1955 hurricane flood where the water spilled over the Plimpton Street Dam and actually went over the top of the dam and cracked it. I've never seen it come over the East Walpole Dam. It's always gone through the culvert. I've seen 3 feet of water in that parking lot back in the 50s. I haven't seen it since in the last 35 years. But my concern is there's only the spillway there now, which only lets over so much water. If it
it's feeding directly into my culverts that go under the buildings. Once those are full, that water's gonna back up and go around somewhere. Where is it gonna go? It's gonna go through the parking lot. At a force, it'll start ripping up cement, pavement and everything else, and even undermining the back of the dam on the Mansion Drive side. That's just something I want to address to you. That's a concern for me, and I think it has to be looked at.
We look at it, but I believe that it is a current situation.
I mean, I look at like the Washington Street Dam where they have an overflow, and it only lets so much through that, and it backs up into the pond. I thought originally that's what they were gonna use. What's the purpose of having the dam now if you're gonna let everything flow through?
Well, if we remove the dam, it's an even worse condition.
Yes, I would agree with that.
We don't have any appreciable storage capacity in the pool. We're constrained by the physical layout of everything at the moment.
I'm aware of that.
We just can't, we're trying not to make anything worse. Whatever water is gonna come through that 24 square mile drainage area, it's coming, and we can't prevent flooding of the parking lot.
Yes, the flooding in the parking lot is usually backed up from the combination of the Hollingsworth and Vos Dam, and what you're saying is the Washington Street bridges.
Or in those more extreme events when you exceed the capacity of the culvert under the buildings.
Yes, but like I said, in 35 years, I've never seen that happen, that I've had the property. And I'm probably in 30, I know I won't be here, probably to even see the dam, I don't know, repaired, but I'm concerned about the future. If we do have a 100-year storm, after you fix that dam, where's that water gonna go? It's gonna come around my buildings. There's no question about it.
That's correct, which is expected today.
So why wouldn't they build, say, a partial spillway, not up as high, and let the water back up in the dam and act as a slow release program instead of letting it all coming through
Well,
hell bent for election?
The scenario with the lowered spillway is sort of a simplified version of the dam on Washington Street. It's buffering the flows that come up to the dam and retains it to some degree and then slowly releases it, rather than just rushing through the pond with no dam there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but what I'm saying is what's happening between the dam and the building. You can see the culvert is much lower than the water level. If you had a flood problem, it's gonna now run around the buildings and virtually demolish the parking lot. When the water comes in now, it's not lifting the tire or the pavement or anything, it's just rising through the, you've probably seen there's like drainages in that culvert.
Yeah.
And it comes up through that, and it'll come around the side of the building, or the front building on Washington Street side. But I don't see it's gonna come around that building and into that building, the way it's set up right now. Just something to think about, and I'm sure we're gonna have some conversations about this. You know, I haven't spoken directly to you for a while, I haven't seen any blueprints like this, but it's a concern of mine, and I know the ills of flood insurance. You pay a lot in and get a very little out, if anything happens.
So I'm really glad you're here, because we have been looking at your buildings and your parking lot and the culvert and all this stuff. And one of the questions we've been asking is, you know, what are the impacts into that area? And are the people that, who own that building, you, aware of what we're doing here and understanding what it all means? So I'm glad you're here. This process is going to continue, and what I want to do is make sure we keep you directly in the discussion so that you can see as the designs, we have to first decide what we're going to do. And then as the designs, whichever way we go, start to come together, make sure that we're all clear on what that means to the parking lot, to the buildings, and so forth. So again, I'm really glad you're here tonight.
And I'm concerned about my building and my parking lots are the obviously staging point for a lot of the construction. And what's gonna happen to my property after they're done?
I think these are all very good questions, and we're not far enough down the path.
Right, I agree.
A choice, but we will be there, and so, yeah, we absolutely need your input on that.
Okay, feel free to talk to me anytime.
Great, thank you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks. Okay, who'd like to go next?
I've already said something. Everybody goes first.
Hi. Mark Romeo, 95 West Street, formerly of East Walpole. I just have a couple of quick questions. The first one is, if next March is the 500-year flood, who has liability for the dam, for that? We don't know where the owner is. No one's taken ownership. If 500 years is next March, who's got the liability?
Right now, it would be the owner of the dam. So, but as you well know, based on what you've heard us say, we don't actually know who that person is.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I don't know that there's a good answer to your question. I know what the answer is, but it doesn't practically mean anything.
I'm not saying to put anyone on the spot. I'm just saying that from the way their presentation was, which makes sense, we're on borrowed time now with this dam, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So if there's no one that would have liability and something like this happens, and the gentleman that was just here, last name Hogan, was that right? And his buildings get demolished, who does he sue?
I don't know. I can tell you that if it was the dam that caused the problem, the liability goes with the owner of the dam. So, again, practically, how do you sue somebody that you can't?
That's right.
I don't know, but that's sort of all hypothetical. I think the better question to be asking is this: the town is either going, in all likelihood, whether we go A or B, the town is likely to end up owning this dam. So as we are thinking through the question of which way to go, that's got to be one of our primary considerations.
Agreed. That's why my point was, I think that part of the decision-making process is probably going to have to happen either way, right? So does it behoove the town to move more quickly on at least establishing some ownership?
I think we need to move with a sense of urgency, given that it's a higher hazard dam. We have been given assurances that it's not in imminent danger of collapse or anything like that. So
Okay.
we shouldn't get too concerned about that. I think we have time. But it is part of the consideration. And again, this is where we find ourselves in such a quandary, because it is likely that the town will end up owning this. And so what position are we going to put the town in is really the question. So in the days, weeks, months ahead, we're going to figure that out. And ultimately, we will get to an answer, and we'll see where that goes. But the choices are going to be the town or the state.
Eventually, it'll either come down to the town. So it sounds like if we repair, then it's the town, and if we eliminate, then it would be the state.
I think it's going to be a point of discussion.
All right, so there's nothing cut and dry yet, other than if we repair, then the town is going to take ownership. Probably.
What DCR has told us is that, as a general rule, they don't take ownership of repair dams.
Okay, all right.
So, again, I don't want to guess that answer, because I want to make sure we would like the state to own it.
Sure,
Mark.
sure.
So I don't want to erode our negotiating position here.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just
So
trying to understand.
I think what you got to understand is, one way or the other, someone's going to end up owning this thing because it's got to get repaired.
Right.
We're going to have to take it through eminent domain to do the repair work. Then it's a question of what's going to happen after that ownership-wise. We haven't figured that out yet.
Got it. So to kick it off, eminent domain, just to have the right to do something.
That's right.
And then we'll, through negotiations, figure out what the future looks like.
We can't work on something that we don't
Right,
own.
right.
Okay.
Another dumb question for you folks. I'm not a dam guy, so, I've been called worse, but when you're talking about a spillway, the spillway is like a fixed thing, right? With a fixed height. Is there other technology that allows more volume or less volume depending on what you need or what the circumstances are? Whereas a 100-year flood might put more volume than that spillway can hold, but is there new technology that wouldn't fall into that $4 or $4.5 million price tag that would mitigate some of those problems down the road, that would allow us to keep the pond, but mitigate some of the long-term projections?
Gates, but we still have the downstream size.
It's water.
I imagine that maybe the removing the spillway and put gate instead of it, but it is a difficult operation. It's more complex in terms of operating and maintaining.
And it may not be effective because we're dealing with the discharge coming out of a 24 square mile drainage area.
Right, so you're kind of hoping that it would be effective, but Mother Nature's going to do what Mother Nature wants at the end of the day.
Yeah,
It may help on some interim storms, so when you get the 500-year storm, I think what our modeling is showing is
It's not going to
will help
matter.
that much.
Right. Doesn't look like anything's going to matter with the 500-year storm, so.
Well, certainly not for the money we're talking about
Right,
now.
exactly, exactly. All right. Yeah, I wasn't trying to put anyone on the spot, I was just trying to understand more, but I appreciate the time everybody's taken, and I know you guys take things seriously, so I know this is not just gonna be done with, you know, with any kind of whatever. I know that you're gonna put the work in, so I appreciate the time.
Before you step down, did somebody down here have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we haven't talked about Norwood much, but if a 500-year flood happened, a 500-year storm, and the dam failed, most of the damage happens, well, it starts right there with those two buildings, but then it goes into Norwood. So we recognize that as well. So I think there's, and that gets into the whole capacity thing. How much water can you push through before it affects the next dam? That was the first question that I asked, and then there's a ripple effect downstream. So we're aware of that. We don't know how to deal with that problem, and I think that's probably beyond the scope of this dam project.
Sure.
But
Sure.
we
All right.
recognize it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Were there other comments? Okay. Mark, thank you. Who'd like to talk next?
Can I just say one more thing, sir?
You may, Ken.
You bring up the liability issue, and again, this was, I think, on Fox 25, probably 5 or 6 years ago. Gene Levanchi was down there. First thing in the morning, I think it might have been the 11 years ago, it was a concern. As far as the liability, and we talked about the costs going down the road, one thing I think Walpole could focus on better, we have faced this in the past, is a preventive maintenance program, a more active preventive maintenance program, whether we end up taking possession of this or not, or DCR gets it. But again, Walpole, this is not the only dam in Walpole. We have 3 others that we already own in Walpole. The Mill Pond Dam, just to reflect back, the state came in and said, you're fixing it. Now, we had to do that because of lack of preventive maintenance, like anything. Now, this is water. This isn't a piece of equipment that you're going to get your money's worth out of. When you ignore the water, it gets worse. We face that with the Allen Dam. The reason the federal government's here now is because maybe we didn't take care of it quite the way we should have. So one of the most important things, being Walpole, is taking care of these important dams that we do own in a matter of maybe reappropriating some of our public works energy, our massive sewer and water bills, and, you know, there's a lot of that money going to purchases where they could, and maybe some of it could be realigned to a preventive maintenance program where we go out and Clark's Pond needs some work. So that bill, the longer we let Clark's Pond grow with tree, I'm gonna stay focused on this, but
Yeah,
yes.
I gotta cut you off, so.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you.
A more preventive maintenance program, and we won't face these
Making a very good point. Ken. Thank you.
astronomic bills.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for having me again. So it seemed like I mean, or man proposes, God disposes, right? Or Mother Nature. I'm curious, I mean, the embankment is going to be there regardless, right? And so I'm just curious, the DCR could maybe answer why you would take ownership and liability in the event of the spillway removal, but not if it was retained. Because it's still a dam, it seems like.
That's correct, but we have a statewide footprint, and we have 300 dams in our inventory already, and to add another dam operating at full pool all the time, from my narrow-minded point of view, it makes more sense for the host community to be the owner under that scenario, and our department seems to lean that way too. So this is the way we're trying to roll out this pilot test project case, whatever you want to call it, to somewhat build a process to deal with abandoned dams, because it's a serious problem. We have a number of abandoned dams, and I think the town of Walpole is lucky that we've selected, I'm self-promoting now, but I don't mind doing so, because in all these cases, there's no do-nothing option. But when it gets down to who's going to be responsible for what in the end, what's unique about this compared to some of our other projects is we've concluded that we have no remove the dam option. That one's actually kind of easy. If a community throws their hands up and says there's absolutely no interest, we've polled the residents, the people that govern the town are convinced the right thing is to remove the dam, then DCR comes in, removes the dam, and there's really no issue. Here we have a little bit of a different twist, and that's why the select board references, we need to work that option out. Like, do we stand our ground and suggest that the town maintains the dam ongoing in the spillway removal case, or do we negotiate our way to the state accepting that? That's to be discussed.
And is that your decision, like in terms of whether you take it on?
Decision yet.
But I mean, ultimately,
To be fair to the community, like we prefaced, is we don't want to shove a project down the throats of the community at large that they don't want. We want exactly what we're doing here. We want discussion, we want community involvement, serious contemplation by the select board, which your select board has done, and then arrive at a solution that's going to work to overcome that realization. There's no do-nothing here.
right,
And,
yeah.
and we've been talking about flooding conditions absent a dam failure. I mean, it's even worse if you consider dam failure.
Like the embankment, everything you're talking
Yes.
about, okay, yeah.
So that's why we that concern about there is no do-nothing
Right,
option.
I mean,
And we'll work
yeah.
our way through this and figure
Right.
out what's best for the town.
Yeah, I mean, who knows in this brave new world that, 1,000-year flood, biblical kinds of things. But it does seem like the 500-year flood, I mean, the 0.2 feet is 2.4 inches, which doesn't seem very significant. I mean, one is red and one is yellow. And so I'm not sure there's a very, the devil's in the details on that, but it does seem a very slight
Yeah, and
kind of
so
difference.
just to because I know other people will pick up on that point, it's not just the depth, it's the speed that the water is moving. Okay, and in the red, the water is moving very fast. In the yellow, it's really not moving. So there's a big difference in terms of, what damage could happen, what harm could come to people, that kind of stuff. And that's what we've got to be thinking about. We talk about liability as if it's a money thing. It's actually not a money thing in my mind. It's really more about, people getting hurt, people getting killed. This is the bigger question here, right? And, liability is liability, and yeah, you get insurance for that and you can cover it with this, that, and the other thing. But we have to be thinking about if somebody actually gets hurt or killed because of what we decide here. That's the bigger picture to me, okay? Who else would like to speak? Yes, please.
Meg Cundert, I live on Plimpton Street, and I walk my dog around the Ondine Trail all the time. I think I'm in the minority here, but looks like removing the spillway seems like the obvious answer, other than the view of the pond. I mean, everything else just falls into place if you're thinking logically as opposed to emotionally. That's all.
Thank you. Other comments? Sure, come on up.
I'd like to say thank you both to the board and to the engineer group that come in tonight to talk on DCR. Thank you very much. My name's Joe Parlon. I live actually on the other side of town on Main Street, but I am a 54-year resident of this town. My dad lives on the side of town that's impacted by this, and I grew up in this town. This is home. And you know, I walk around a lot of properties. This past weekend, I walked the town forest. I've been using these waterways, my siblings fishing, boating, and I became aware of this issue when I became aware of the fact that somebody is trying to purchase the pond and build on it. And so I guess the thing that my question is this. I don't want to belabor the liability point. I understand the town has a responsibility to the totality of the citizens of this town to make a good decision. But I was at a meeting last night for one of the other boards regarding the construction that's going to go around this body of water. And so I guess I talked last night, and the answer I got is what sent me here tonight. And so what I don't understand that maybe you could explain to me then is you still all have a lot of unanswered questions as to the impact of whatever plan gets followed. So I don't understand how a board, and I don't, the word subordinate to you might not be properly termed. Obviously, the selectmen can't tell another board what to do, but certainly the selectmen are the prestige board that's responsible for the general welfare and public well-being of the town. And I'm just concerned as to how a subordinate board in the town is going to be approving construction processes around a property when the experts in this room can't even say what's going to go on with that property, because we don't know what the water's going to do yet. And until you know what the water's going to do, how is it conceivable that any other board in town could permit any kind of use that abutted that land? It just seems to me to be an impractical and irresponsible decision, because the first thing that should be done would be to allow the selectmen, the select board, sorry, my mom did this a million years ago, and so, pardon the terminology. I don't understand how they're making their decisions when the people who are the first in line to make those decisions, when our executives in town have yet to make their decisions. And whether or not you have an answer for that, maybe it's something that gets discussed between the boards, because I just want to go back to that it would seem that if somebody's going to approve something along that body of water, how can they approve it when we don't even know what that body of water is going to do?
So I'm not going to try to answer it other than to say we've got rules, we have zoning bylaws, we have rules the planning board operates under. Which board were you in front of last night?
The zoning board
ZBA.
last night.
So we have zoning bylaws. The zoning board, of course, enforces the existing zoning bylaws. So the questions that they can answer would be only those things that can be done with existing bylaws and things that are existing today. Things that happen in the future, they can't guess on what the future might hold.
But doesn't the engineering change of that water affect what can be done?
I think it could, but I think it doesn't make it, and correct me if someone thinks I'm wrong here, but I don't think it makes it worse for the existing conditions. The water's not going to go onto places that it's not today. It may move from where it is today away from where it is today, or it may not. So again, the zoning bylaws are what we go by. The zoning board does that. And they can't be making decisions based on what may or may not happen. They have to deal with the facts of the things as they exist today.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Yep, thank you.
Sure.
I just add that no decision was made by the planning board last night. I believe this matter is still pending with the conservation legally.
Thank you. All right, who else? These are great comments and great conversation, so, no, wait, well, no, we've got somebody else here, so let her go first. Thank you.
I appreciate, my name's Betsy Fernandez. I live at 10 Rose Court Way in the Riverwalk Association. And I appreciate the presentation, very informative. And I appreciate all the emotional attachment to the pond, which I completely share. But in my own little personal bubble, I also care about my own pocketbook. And we moved into our home 7 years ago. After looking at many, many places, we moved from Connecticut. I walked into this place, I saw the view, and that was it. I was done. And I think that part of the pricing on our home had to do with the pond view. And should we ever have to move, I want the pricing to fit my environment that the house is in. And the loss of the pond, I know it's, I don't want anybody to die. I care about the Hogans. We have a personal interest in the Hogans because we use their parking lot, very generous of them to let us do that. But the pond is a big part of our community, which we take care of with our tax dollars and with our own pocketbook money. We do the plowing, the landscaping, all of that comes from us, not from the town, but we still pay our town taxes because we care about our town. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said in my opening comments, I'm not unsympathetic to your argument. Okay. Who else? Yes, please come up.
My name is John Duff. I live at 9 Rose Court. And I'm only been in this town for 3.5 months. I lived in the town. I lived in Milton all my life. I moved here. I saw that beautiful spot, beautiful land, beautiful house, beautiful pond. It was what my wife and I were looking for, and we loved it. We were able to purchase that house, and it's a beautiful spot. I would hate to see that, the reason why we went there. Swans were in that pond. We walk that all the time. We see ducks. It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place. I'd be so disappointed if something changed. We love it here, and please keep the pond. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. I appreciate it. Who else? Anybody else? I'm going to let you come up one more time, but I'm giving you 30 seconds.
All right. It'll be less than that. But since you've got Mr. Hogan here, I wondered about any, and those buildings are not new. I mean, I don't know if there's any contingencies about, or solutions, because all the loss in life and property are those 2 buildings, as far as I'm aware. And maybe I'm wrong, but are there any scenarios where you eliminate the buildings, you buy out Mr. Hogan if he's willing, and maybe it's it's less money than even whatever, but that's just something I was just thinking of, because that,
Thank you.
If that were eliminated.
I appreciate your input as always. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? That's what we're here for tonight. Okay, then I'm going to wrap us up. I am going to just say a couple of closing remarks. Number one, thank you all for being here tonight.
I'm sorry, can I just tell
You
you
may.
one more thing?
Sure.
I just wanted to point out that after the September meeting, there was a 2-week public comment period where people could post comments to the DCR website, and so they're reopening that for another week of comment. And I told Aoife that I will get her the link tomorrow so she can put it on the town website.
Perfect. Okay, so good opportunity. I would take full advantage of that. So let me just bring us home here. I was starting out by saying thank you for being here tonight. This is an important part of the overall process. I suspect you get from listening to the comments from the board tonight that this is not an easy question for us to answer, and yet it is one that must be answered. The do-nothing option is not a choice. And so we are going to continue down this path. We're going to continue to evaluate options. We will consider all the input that we've heard here tonight. Somewhere in the days, months, weeks ahead, we're going to have to make a decision. It's not going to be an easy decision no matter what we do. We've talked about what it means to repair the dam. We've talked about what it means to eliminate the spillway. Neither one of those is a overall win for anybody. And so we are aware of that, and we've got to come to what is the right decision for the town. We'll do that by continuing to work with our partners from DCR to continue to dig into the facts here and to try and drive out what I would consider to be a fact-based decision and one that is in the best interest of the town as a whole. So before I close, any comments from DCR? Closing comments?
Thank you, everyone. And please take the time to comment as Jen described, if you think of anything in the coming days.
Any comments from the board? Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 4-0. We're now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.